For anyone out there who's concerned about the price of their power bills, which I'm sure is most of us, listen up, because 50UP Club is letting you have your say. They're conducting a survey, and they want to hear what your long-term interests are when it comes to power pricing. And they're doing that because of a current legal challenge to oppose electricity price cuts. Joining us on the phone, Mr. Christopher Zinn from 50UP Club. How are you, Chris?
Yes, I'm very well. Thank you, Warren and Mark.
Well, let me get this right. At the moment, we've got the energy regulator proposing the power price cuts. We've heard about that, which is great. Those cuts would be between $106 to $313. But the networks aren't happy and they are opposing the cuts.
Yeah, and these are the government-owned networks and the same ones that are up for a long-term lease. So they've gone to the competition tribunal to try and get these cuts overruled. So it is a real shindig involving lawyers at 12 paces, but our point is that this whole argument is about what is in the long-term interest of consumers. Now, that's what's meant to have been the guiding principle for the past few years when we've seen power prices go through the roof. But we think it's fair enough that actually us consumers, particularly the 50UP people who actually arguably suffer more because they're at home most, they have a higher burden of power bills for various reasons, that they make their voice heard. So that's why we're asking you to go to the 50upclub.com.au and just answer a few simple questions about what you consider the long-term interest of consumers and yourself to be.
So, Chris, have I got this right? The state government is using taxpayer dollars in court at the moment to try to ensure that we pay more for electricity?
Well, it's to try and ensure that we don't get the full cuts that the Australian energy regulator has said we should have. Now, this isn't something they just pluck out of thin air. The regulator makes a price determination. It's incredibly complicated. They look at all sorts of data and figures. They consider the networks, and those are, as I've said, the government-owned entities, some of which are up for long-term lease, which distribute the electricity through poles for wires. They consider them inefficient in New South Wales, and that's, as a result, we've been paying too much extra for too long. So that's why there are savings, as you said, between $300 for the average household and $100. It depends where you actually live. So we think after all this pain for this time, it's fair enough that some of that saving is passed on. But as I've said, the government beg to differ.
Yeah, of course, the claim against the electricity providers, networks in particular, is that they're gold-plating infrastructure. They're making it better than it needs to be. They're coming back and saying if we do have the cuts, we'll have more blackouts, etc.
Exactly. And look, this whole issue of reliability is very interesting. It's like to get anything 100% reliable is an incredible cost. To make it 99.99% can be done at a much lower cost. And it's sort of equivalent a bit to that. I mean, we're used to having electricity 24/7 and it being very reliable, as it is most of the time. But to actually make it much more reliable than most people would need does come at a great cost. And that's one that was really sheeted back to us consumers. So I suppose that's one of the questions here. What does reliability mean to you, and how much are you prepared to pay for it? And we don't think that was actually, adequately shown and people are allowed to make sort of meaningful comparisons.
Now, Chris, another question that's been raised and also comes at a cost is that of safety, having a safe network and certainly electricity safety in some of our rural areas. And we saw what happened down in Victoria a few years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the bushfire-prone areas. And in fact, that's, the areas in the bush are the ones that stand to get the biggest saving in terms of $300 for the average household. So look, I think nobody would want to compromise safety, I hope. But again, safety is not an absolute. There are degrees of safety, and that's what the lawyers are arguing about. The regulator says, as far as they're concerned, it is actually quite safe. And there are other states that operate safety regimes for a much lower rate, with just the same level of safety. So again, that's not necessarily something I would expect ordinary lay people to have a grasp of.
Yeah.
It's fair enough that we do have some say of how we as consumers would balance reliability, safety and quality. And that's what the legislation, what's called the National Electricity Objective, is all about.
So at 50upclub.com, you've got the survey. What are you going to do with those results?
Yeah, well, look, on August the 6th, we have our day in court. That is, consumers can have their voice heard. So we want as many people as possible to contribute to our survey so we can actually take those results to the tribunal. There are other consumer groups who would, and in fact there's a consumer group, Public Interest Advocacy Centre, that's in fact pushing for more cuts than that $100 to $300 savings. So we think that there's a pretty good case to make, but as ever, it's important to make your voice heard, and say, go to the website, you can fill in a questionnaire very simply and easily, and we will take that to the powers that be and hope that the power that we pay for is actually something that, is costed more in terms with our long-term interests, and not others.
Okay, well, good on you, Chris. Christopher Zinn from the FiftyUpClub.com. 125,000 plus members it is at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and climbing. So, look, that's just in New South Wales, but we're looking to go nationally. This is also a national interest. What happens with New South Wales in terms of this challenge could actually affect other states as well.
Okay, and that survey is underway, of course. 50upclub.com, we've been talking about on 2GB and advertising for a while now with some great deals on health insurance, on electricity, but also helping consumers with this survey that will go to that tribunal. Thank you for your time, Christopher.
No, my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Christopher Zinn from 50upclub.com.